The massive holographic display filled the United Earth Defense Command Center. 15 alien faces stared down at the assembled human leaders, their expressions ranging from disgust to barely hidden fear. At the center of the alien group, the Grand Speaker of the Galactic Council raised all 4 of his arms, a gesture that demanded absolute silence. Admiral James Walker stood at parade rest, his weathered face showing no emotion. 40 years of military service had taught him one thing: when aliens tried to look intimidating, they were usually terrified. People of Earth, the Grand Speaker's translator boomed through the chamber. You have gone too far. Your new warship class violates 17 different peace treaties. The Nightmare must be surrendered to the Council immediately. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Everyone knew this moment would come, but not so soon. The Nightmare-class ships were supposed to be completely undetectable. General Thompson, Earth's senior military representative, stepped forward. With all due respect, Grand Speaker, the Nightmare-class vessels are purely defensive weapons. We have neither violated any treaties nor threatened any species. A reptilian council member slammed his tail against his hover platform. Lies. We have proof of your ship using quantum void technology. Such weapons could tear apart the fabric of space itself. Walker allowed himself a small smile. They were scared of the ship's capabilities, but they didn't know even half of what the Nightmare could do. The quantum void drive was just the beginning. The Grand Speaker raised his voice. You have 24 Earth hours to surrender the HMS Nightmare and all related technology. Failure to comply will be considered an act of war against the Galactic Council. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the room in tense silence. President Rogers turned to Walker. Admiral, they found out about the quantum void drive. Do they know about the other systems? No, ma'am, Walker replied, his voice steady. They only detected our basic propulsion signature. The dark matter weapons and phase-shifting capabilities remain secret. General Thompson cursed under his breath. How did they even detect that? The void drive should be completely invisible to their sensors. They didn't detect it directly, said Walker, moving to the central tactical display. They noticed what they couldn't see: the blank spots in their sensor networks. The Council's gotten lazy, relying on their quantum detection grid to watch everything in their space. When they found spots where their sensors showed absolutely nothing, they knew something was wrong. President Rogers sat heavily in her chair. Options. Walker pressed a few buttons on the display, bringing up a strategic overlay of Earth's solar system. They'll send what they call a diplomatic fleet, standard Council procedure. It'll be packed with their most powerful warships, hidden behind a few ceremonial vessels. A show of force, Thompson nodded. Classic intimidation tactic. Exactly, Walker continued, but they don't know that's exactly what we wanted. The Nightmare isn't just a ship, it's a message. One we've been waiting to deliver ever since they forced those peace treaties on us 30 years ago. The president's eyes narrowed. You knew they'd detect it eventually. Yes, Mom. The void drive signature was deliberately calibrated to be just noticeable enough. We needed them to find out about it, but only after we had a whole fleet ready. Understanding dawned on General Thompson's face, a calculated revelation. We wanted them to think they'd caught us with a single dangerous ship. When in reality, Walker finished, we have 12 Nightmare-class vessels ready for deployment. The HMS Nightmare is just the first one we let them detect. President Rogers stood up, her decision made. Admiral Walker, you have full operational authority. Show them exactly why humanity doesn't respond well to ultimatums. Walker saluted sharply. Yes, ma'am. I'll have the Nightmare ready for their diplomatic fleet. Time to show the Council why they should have read the fine print in those treaties more carefully. As Walker left the command center, his comm unit buzzed. The Nightmare's AI was reporting that all systems were optimal. The quantum void drive was purring like a kitten, the dark matter cannons were charged, and the phase shifters were ready to break every law of physics the Council thought they understood. In 24 hours, the galaxy would learn why you don't corner a species that had spent most of its history preparing for wars that might never come. Humanity had turned paranoia into an art form, and the nightmare was their masterpiece. The Council thought they were about to witness the surrender of humanity's most dangerous weapon. Instead, they were about to see why Earth's warships were named after bad dreams. The Council's diplomatic fleet arrived exactly when Earth's military predicted, 14 minutes before the ultimatum deadline. Their ships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their silver hulls gleaming in the sunlight. At the front, 3 ceremonial vessels led the way, their ornate designs masking the heavy warships that lurked behind them. In Earth's Defense Command Center, Admiral Walker watched the tactical display with cold amusement. Right on schedule. How many ships did they actually bring? Sensors count 47 warships hidden behind those 3 diplomatic vessels. Lieutenant Adams reported from his station, including 5 dreadnoughts. They'd really want that nightmare, sir. Walker nodded, tapping his command console. And how many of their sensors have spotted our ship yet? None, sir. The nightmare is still in complete void phase. They're looking right through us. The massive alien fleet moved closer to Earth's orbit, their formation spreading out in what they probably thought was an impressive display of power. The lead diplomatic vessel opened a communication channel. People of Earth, the Grand Speaker's voice boomed through the command center. Your time has expired. Surrender the nightmare now, and we will show mercy. Walker pressed his comm button. This is Admiral Walker of the United Earth Defense Force. Before you continue with your rehearsed speech, I have a question. Did any of your species ever study ancient human military history? There was a pause. The Grand Speaker seemed confused by the question. Your primitive warfare histories are irrelevant to this situation. That's unfortunate, Walker said, allowing himself a small smile. Because if you had, you might have learned about an old human tactic called the pincer movement. Right on cue, Earth's orbital defense grid activated. Hundreds of weapon platforms that had been disguised as communication satellites revealed their true nature. The Council fleet suddenly found itself surrounded by a sphere of heavy weapons. But that wasn't what made the alien ship's crews panic. The HNS Nightmare simply appeared, not from hyperspace or any known form of faster-than-light travel. One moment there was empty space behind the Council's fleet, and the next moment, humanity's most advanced warship sat there, its midnight black hull seeming to drink in the starlight. Impossible, one of the alien commanders shouted over the open channel. No ship can bypass our sensor nets. Walker's voice remained calm. Your sensors rely on quantum entanglement networks to detect any form of matter or energy. But tell me, how do you detect something that can shift itself partially out of normal spacetime? The Council fleet's formation broke instantly. Ships began turning in every direction, their weapons trying and failing to lock onto the nightmare. The massive vessel seemed to flicker in and out of reality, appearing in different positions faster than any ship should be able to move. This is your only warning, Walker announced to the increasingly panicked alien fleet. The HNS Nightmare is not the prize you think it is. It's not some trophy to be claimed. It's a demonstration. As if to emphasize his point, the Nightmare phased through one of the Council's dreadnoughts, literally through it, passing through solid matter like a ghost. The dreadnought's crew screamed in terror as the black ship emerged from their vessel's hull without leaving a scratch. By the void itself, the Grand Speaker's voice shook. What have you humans created? Something you forced us to build, Walker replied. 30 years ago, you came to Earth with your peace treaties and your regulations. You thought you were being clever, limiting our conventional weapons and ships. So we got unconventional. The Nightmare's hull began to pulse with a deep, dark energy that made the alien sensors go haywire. Warning alarms blared across the Council fleet as their quantum communication networks began to fail. Last chance, Walker announced. Leave Earth's orbit now, or we'll show you why we named this ship class after humanity's darkest dreams. The Council's diplomatic vessels were the first to flee, their ceremonial dignity forgotten. The warships tried to maintain some semblance of order, but it was clear the demonstration had shattered their confidence. As the alien fleet retreated in disarray, Lieutenant Adams looked up from his console. "Sir, should we tell them about the other 11 nightmares?" Walker shook his head, watching the Council ships scramble to escape. "No need, Lieutenant. That's a nightmare we'll save for another day." 2 hours after their first retreat, the Council fleet regrouped at the edge of the solar system. Their commanders were no longer hiding their fear behind diplomatic language. The Grand Speaker himself had gone silent, leaving the military ships in charge. "Target that demon ship," ordered Commander Rex of the Council's Third Fleet. "I don't care about the treaties anymore. Use everything we have." The Council's most powerful warships formed a new attack pattern. 5 dreadnoughts created a pentagram formation, their ancient quantum weapons charging up. Behind them, 40 smaller warships prepared their conventional weapons. They had stopped caring about looking diplomatic. Inside the HMS Nightmares Bridge, Admiral Walker watched their formation with interest. "They're adapting." "Good." "Sir?" Lieutenant Adams looked concerned. "They're preparing to fire enough firepower to crack a small moon." Walker nodded calmly. "Perfect. Time to show them why we called this the Ghost Protocol." He pressed his command console. "Engineering, activate the phase shifters. Full spectrum." The Nightmare's hull began to change. The already dark metal seemed to become even darker, as if it was absorbing not just light, but reality itself. When the Council fleet fired their combined weapons, a massive burst of energy that could have vaporized a continent, something impossible happened. The beams passed straight through the Nightmare. Not just 1 or 2 beams. All of them. The mighty warship flickered like a hologram, becoming transparent as every form of energy simply passed through it. On the Council ship's sensors, the Nightmare appeared to exist in 12 different places at once, each image equally real and equally untouchable. Commander Rex's scales turned pale. "What sorcery is this?" Walker's voice came through their comm systems, somehow clear despite their best encryption. "Not sorcery, Commander. Just good old human physics. You see, when we signed those treaties limiting our weapons, we spent 30 years studying something else entirely: quantum states of matter." The Nightmare suddenly appeared inside the Council fleet's formation. Not dropping out of stealth or decloaking, it simply phased into existence between their ships. Before they could react, it started to move. Through their ships, through solid metal and energy shields, through everything. Fascinating fact about quantum physics, Walker continued as his ship passed through Council vessels like a ghost. Everything is mostly empty space. The actual solid matter in your ships makes up less than 1% of their volume. We just figured out how to navigate through the empty spaces. Pure terror spread through the Council fleet. Crews watched in horror as the black ship drifted through their hulls, passing through reactors, crew quarters, and command centers. The Nightmare wasn't firing a single shot. It didn't need to. Lieutenant Adams monitored the Council ship's communications. "Sir, their crews are starting to panic. 3 ships have already lost containment because their crews abandoned their posts." "Time to add some psychological warfare," Walker ordered. "Activate the quantum resonance field." The Nightmare began to emit a low-frequency pulse. While completely harmless, it created a sensation of existential dread in any organic being that could perceive it. The pulse bypassed all known shielding, reaching deep into the Council ships. Alien crew members began to experience their worst fears. Some saw their ships dissolving around them. Others felt like they were being phased out of existence. A few simply collapsed, their minds unable to process what they were witnessing. "Stop," Commander Rex finally broke. "In the name of all that's sacred, stop this madness." Walker allowed himself a small smile. "That's the interesting thing about humanity, Commander. You pushed us into a corner, limited our conventional weapons, restricted our normal ship designs, so we got creative. And do you know what humans are really, really good at? The Nightmare suddenly solidified in front of Rex's command ship, its hull now so dark it looked like a ship-shaped hole in space. "We're really good at turning our nightmares into weapons," Walker finished. "Now, would you like to see what this ship can do when it actually decides to fight back?" The Council fleet didn't wait for a demonstration. Ships began jumping to hyperspace in pure panic, abandoning their formation and their pride. The mighty alien armada that had arrived to seize humanity's greatest weapon fled from a ship that hadn't fired a single shot. As the last Council ship disappeared, Lieutenant Adams turned to Walker. "Sir, should we pursue?" "No need," Walker replied. "They'll spread the word. Sometimes the most effective weapon isn't the one you fire. It's the one everyone's too afraid to make you use." The Council's leaders held an emergency meeting in their command ship, now hiding behind the system's largest gas giant. Holograms of fleet admirals flickered around the chamber, their images distorted by interference they couldn't explain. "We must coordinate our attacks." Admiral Dex slammed his fist on his command console. 50 ships attacking as one. They can't phase through everything at once. The Grand Speaker's image wavered. "Our quantum communication network is the most advanced in the galaxy. We will use it to..." His hologram vanished mid-sentence. Then another admiral's image disappeared. Then another. Inside the HMS Nightmare's command center, Admiral Walker watched the chaos unfold on his tactical display. "Begin Phase 4. Let's show them what real electronic warfare looks like." Lieutenant Adams typed rapidly at his station. "Activating the AI warfare suite now, sir. Operation Dark Mirror is live." The Nightmare's quantum processors sprang to life. Unlike the Council's brute force approach to technology, humanity had spent decades perfecting something far more subtle: artificial intelligence that could think in 11 dimensions. Across the Council fleet, communication systems began to fail in impossible ways. Their unbreakable quantum-entangled networks, technology they'd used for thousands of years, simply stopped working. "What's happening?" A Council captain's panicked voice cut through the static. "I've lost contact with Fleet Command. This is Admiral Dex. All ships form up on my position and..." His voice cut off. Not because of interference, but because his ship had vanished from all sensors. It was still there, visible through viewport windows, but every electronic system in the fleet registered it as completely gone. Walker's voice echoed through every Council ship, somehow bypassing their comm systems entirely. "Interesting thing about quantum entanglement," he said conversationally. "It's based on the idea that two particles can be linked, no matter how far apart they are. But what happens when one of those particles exists in multiple quantum states at once?" The Council ship's crews watched in horror as their vessels began disappearing from each other's sensors, one by one. Not through any physical damage. They simply ceased to exist as far as their computers were concerned. "Your entire communication network is based on quantum-locked particles," Walker continued. "Very advanced, very secure, impossible to hack. Unless you can manipulate the quantum state of reality itself, which, thanks to our phase drive research, we can." On the bridge of the Council command ship, the Grand Speaker watched helplessly as his mighty fleet fell into chaos. Ships fired at sensor ghosts. Vessels crashed into each other trying to maintain formation without working sensors. Crew members abandoned their posts as ship systems reported them as simultaneously dead and alive. "Admiral," Lieutenant Adams reported, "their AI defense systems are trying to adapt. Should we let them?" Walker smiled. "Let them think they're succeeding for exactly 30 seconds. Then show them why trying to outthink our quantum AI was a mistake." The Council ship's computers suddenly came back online. Their crews cheered for exactly half a minute. Then every system displayed the same message. "Quantum state. UNDFI. EK. Reality K. Failed. CHRDING or Protoxiol. Activated." The Nightmare appeared in the middle of their formation, but this time something was different. The ship seemed to split into 12 identical copies, each one as solid and real as the others. When Council gunners tried to target them, their weapons reported that all 12 ships existed in the same space at the same time. You see, Walker's voice was almost gentle now. We couldn't build bigger guns because of your treaties. We couldn't make stronger shields. So we did something else. We learned how to exist everywhere and nowhere at once. We turned quantum uncertainty into an art form. The Grand Speaker watched as his fleet's most advanced combat AIs began to crash, unable to process targets that violated the basic laws of physics. Ship after ship went dark, their crews unable to trust a single reading or command. "This is your final warning," Walker announced. "The next demonstration won't be a demonstration. It will be a lesson in why humanity's greatest weapon isn't our technology. It's our imagination." The Council fleet didn't need to discuss retreat this time. Every ship that could still navigate turned and fled, leaving behind their perfect formation and their shattered pride. The mighty armada that had ruled space through technological superiority had just learned that they weren't the only ones who could break the laws of physics. They were just the ones who'd stopped trying to break new ones. The remains of the Council fleet regrouped near the system's asteroid belt. Their once perfect formation was now a scattered mess of frightened ships. But they still had one trump card left, their most powerful dreadnought. The Starbreaker had finally arrived through an emergency jump. "Enough games." Fleet Commander Vex's voice boomed across space. His massive dreadnought, 5 times larger than the Nightmare, moved to the front of the formation. "Your quantum tricks won't work against pure destructive power." In the Nightmare's command center, Admiral Walker watched the massive ship with interest. Lieutenant Adams looked up from his console. "Sir, that's their Planet Killer-class vessel. Its main gun can crack a planet's core." "Perfect timing." Walker nodded. "I was wondering when they'd bring out their big guns. Time to show them our real weapons." He pressed his comm button. "Engineering, power up the dark matter cannons. Full capacity." The Nightmare's hull began to change again, but differently this time. Instead of becoming ghostly, it started to emit a deep purple glow. Streams of invisible energy coursed through special conduits that had remained dormant until now. "You know what's interesting about dark matter?" Walker's voice carried across to the Council fleet. "It makes up most of our universe, but nobody can see it. Your scientists spent thousands of years trying to understand it. We spent 30 years learning how to use it." The Starbreaker's main cannon began to charge, its energy readings going off the scale. Commander Vex laughed. "Your ship may be able to phase through normal matter, human, but let's see it phase through enough energy to destroy a world." "Why would we need to phase through it?" Walker replied calmly. "When we can simply move it." The Nightmare's dark matter cannons activated. There was no bright flash, no dramatic beam of energy. Instead, space itself seemed to bend. Invisible hands made of gravity reached out across the void. The Starbreaker fired its planet-killer weapon, a beam of pure energy that could vaporize continents. But halfway to the Nightmare, the beam curved. Like water flowing down a drain, the massive energy blast spiraled away into nothing. "Impossible," Vex screamed. "Nothing can bend energy like that." "Dark matter can," Walker explained. "It's what holds galaxies together. And now, we use it to take things apart." The Nightmare's purple glow intensified. Around it, spheres of intense gravity began to form. Miniature black holes that lasted just seconds before dissolving. Council ships found themselves pulled in multiple directions at once. Metal hulls groaned under forces they were never designed to resist. "Sir," Lieutenant Adams reported, "their shields are trying to compensate for the gravity distortions. Should I increase power?" Walker nodded. "Show them what a real Nightmare looks like." The dark matter cannons pulsed again. This time, they created a complex web of gravitational forces. Smaller Council ships were crushed like empty soda cans. Larger vessels were torn apart as different sections of their hulls were pulled in opposite directions. The Starbreaker tried to fight back, its massive engines training against the invisible forces. But the nightmare wasn't just creating gravity. It was sculpting it, using it like an artist uses clay. "The interesting thing about your treaties," Walker said as he watched the mighty dreadnought being pulled apart, "is that they never mentioned anything about dark matter weapons. You were so focused on energy beams and explosions that you forgot about the fundamental forces of the universe." Vex's voice was pure panic now. "Stop. We surrender. Just. What are you?" "We're human," Walker replied. "We're the species you tried to chain down with rules and regulations. Instead, you forced us to think beyond conventional weapons, beyond normal physics. You made us reach into the dark spaces between stars and turn them into weapons." The Starbreaker's hull finally cracked, the massive ship splitting into pieces. Not a single shot had been fired. It had been torn apart by the very fabric of space itself. The remaining Council ships fled in terror, not even bothering to maintain formation. Their mighty fleet, which had arrived to seize humanity's greatest weapon, had instead witnessed what happened when humans were forced to get creative with physics. As the last ships disappeared into hyperspace, Lieutenant Adams turned to Walker. "Sir, should we tell them about the dark energy cannons?" Walker smiled. "Let's save something for next time. After all, the best nightmares are the ones you don't see coming." The Grand Council chamber on Capital World had never been so chaotic. Representatives from 15 species shouted and argued while emergency broadcasts played on giant screens around them. The footage showed the HMS Nightmare destroying the Starbreaker, played on endless repeat. "The humans must be stopped." The reptilian ambassador slammed his tail against the floor. "They have become too dangerous. Stop them. Stop them." The normally calm, crystalline representative's voice cracked with fear. "Did you not see what one ship did to our combined fleets? One ship." In the center of the chamber, the Grand Speaker struggled to maintain order. His 4 arms waved frantically as dozens of emergency messages flooded his console. The Council was falling apart in real time. On Earth, Admiral Walker watched the chaos unfold through intercepted broadcasts. The Nightmare floated silently in high orbit, its dark hull a reminder of what happened to those who threatened humanity. "Sir," Lieutenant Adams reported, "we're picking up massive fleet movements across Council space. The Crystalline Federation has recalled all their ships. The Mercurial Alliance is abandoning their Council bases. 3 other species have already declared their independence from the Council." Walker nodded. "And the remaining ones?" "Fighting among themselves, sir. The Reptilian Confederation is threatening war against anyone who doesn't support immediate action against Earth. The energy beings have responded by shutting down all quantum gate access to their systems." The tactical display showed the collapse of 1,000-year-old alliances in real time. Trade routes were being closed. Defense pacts were being abandoned. The mighty Galactic Council, which had ruled space for over 10 millennia, was shattering like glass. "Message from Earth Command, sir," Adams announced. "President Rogers wants to know if we should make our announcement now." Perfect timing. Walker straightened his uniform. "Put me on all frequencies. Use the quantum breach we created in their networks. Make sure every species in the Council can hear this." The Grand Speaker's frantic attempts to restore order were interrupted as every screen in the Council chamber suddenly showed Admiral Walker's face. "Members of the Galactic Council," Walker began, his voice calm but firm. "You're currently witnessing what happens when you try to cage a species that has spent its entire history preparing for the worst. The HMS Nightmare isn't just a ship, it's a message." The chamber fell silent. Even the angry reptilian ambassador stopped mid-shout. "For 30 years, you forced humanity to live under your treaties. You limited our weapons, restricted our ships, and thought you were keeping us safely contained. Instead, you pushed us to think beyond conventional warfare, beyond normal physics, beyond your understanding of what was possible." The tactical displays showed more Council ships retreating to their home systems. Ancient power structures were collapsing by the minute. The nightmare demonstrated only a fraction of what we've developed. While you were watching our conventional military, counting our carriers and battleships, we were learning how to bend reality itself. We turned quantum mechanics into a weapon. We harnessed dark matter for our guns. We learned to exist in multiple states of reality at once. In the council chamber, the Grand Speaker sank into his chair as more emergency messages flooded in. 6 more species had just announced their withdrawal from the council. But here's what should really terrify you, Walker continued. The nightmare was just a demonstration model, a prototype. Right now, Earth has an entire fleet of newer, more advanced ships preparing for launch. Ships that make the nightmare look outdated. Complete panic broke out in the chamber. The mighty council, which had ruled the galaxy through technological superiority, was watching its power evaporate in real time. So here's humanity's message to the galaxy. We don't want war. We never did. All we wanted was to be left alone to develop at our own pace. You tried to control us, and in doing so, you forced us to become something far more dangerous than you could imagine. The Grand Speaker looked around his empty chamber. Most representatives had already fled to emergency ships. The old council is finished, Walker declared. The era of forcing other species to live under your rules is over. It's time for a new approach, one based on mutual respect rather than intimidation. Earth will help establish this new order, and our ships will ensure it stays fair. As the transmission ended, the last remnants of the council's power crumbled. The mighty alliance that had ruled space for 10,000 years had been broken not by war or rebellion, but by the terror of what humanity had become when pushed too far. And somewhere in orbit around Earth, the HMS Nightmare's dark hull absorbed starlight, a silent reminder that sometimes the most effective weapon isn't the one you use. It's the one that makes using weapons unnecessary. 1 month after the Council's collapse, representatives from 50 spacefaring species gathered in Earth's orbit. The location had been chosen deliberately. The HMS Nightmare floated silently above the meeting station, its dark hull a quiet reminder of why they were all there. Admiral Walker stood at the main podium, looking out at the gathered aliens. Some had been council members. Others were species that had been oppressed by the council's rules. All of them watched the human admiral with a mixture of fear and respect. The old era ended because of fear, Walker began. The council feared what humanity might become, so they tried to chain us down. That fear led them to create exactly what they were afraid of. The massive viewing windows showed more ships arriving. But these weren't council vessels. They were ships from independent worlds, coming to witness what would replace the old order. Today, we reveal everything, Walker continued. No more secrets, no more hidden weapons. The galaxy deserves to know exactly what they're dealing with. Lieutenant Adams, now promoted to commander, pressed a button on his console. The space around Earth seemed to shimmer, and suddenly 11 more ships appeared, each one identical to the Nightmare, their black hulls forming a perfect circle around the planet. The alien representatives gasped. Some tried to flee, but Walker raised his hand. Don't be afraid. If we wanted to use these ships for conquest, we could have done it the moment the council fell. Instead, we're going to use them for something else. Peace. The massive screen behind him lit up, showing technical specifications for the Nightmare-class ships. Not weapons data, but their other capabilities. Faster than light travel without damaging space-time, gravity manipulation for terraforming, dark matter control for energy production. The same technology that makes these ships terrible weapons also makes them incredible tools. The phase drive that lets us slip through enemy ships. It can help us build bases inside gas giants. The dark matter cannons. They can stabilize dying stars. The alien representatives began to murmur among themselves. Fear was being replaced by curiosity, then by understanding. Earth is establishing a new organization today, Walker announced. Not a council that rules through fear, but an alliance that works through cooperation. Any species that wants to join is welcome, under two simple conditions. He held up one finger. First, every member has the right to develop their own technology and culture without interference. No more treaties limiting growth. No more forced sharing of technology. A second finger joined the first. Second, any act of unprovoked aggression against another member species will be met with immediate response from the Nightmare Fleet, not for revenge, but for peacekeeping. The room was silent as the implications sank in. Humanity wasn't offering to rule. They were offering to protect. We're calling it the Free Species Alliance, Walker continued. Earth will provide the peacekeepers, but every member gets an equal vote in all decisions. No species can dominate another. No technology can be forcibly taken. Commander Adams stepped forward with a stack of data tablets. These contain full specifications for our quantum communication network. Our first gift to the Alliance members: instant, secure communication across any distance. The representatives began reading, their eyes widening as they understood the level of technology being freely shared. The Nightmare Fleet will patrol Alliance space, Walker explained. Not to enforce our will, but to ensure every species has the chance to develop without fear. The ships that terrify the Council will now protect the freedom of every Alliance member. He looked out at the gathered species. Humanity never wanted to rule the galaxy. We just wanted to explore it, to learn from it, to grow within it. The Council tried to stop that growth and created weapons of unprecedented power. Now we're offering to turn those weapons into shields, not just for Earth, but for every species that wants to grow without fear. The first to stand was, surprisingly, the former Grand Speaker of the Council. Earth has shown us both ultimate power and ultimate restraint. The Crystalline Federation votes to join the Alliance. One by one, other representatives stood. Species that had been enemies for centuries found themselves standing together, united not by fear, but by the promise of protected freedom. As the votes were counted and the new alliance took shape, the 12 Nightmare-class ships began to move, taking up their new patrol positions. The ships that had been built as humanity's ultimate weapons were transforming into something else, the guardians of a free galaxy. Commander Adams turned to Walker. "Sir, do we tell them about the new ships we're building?" Walker smiled. "Let's save that surprise for anyone who thinks about breaking the peace. After all, humanity's imagination didn't stop with the Nightmare class, and now we can focus that imagination on building rather than defending." Above them, the Nightmare ships slipped into quantum phase, becoming invisible guardians of a new era. The weapons that had redefined terror had just redefined peace.